my name's Jo Frost. I am not Super Nanny. Apologies for anyone who saw my name on the programme and thought that's who you were getting. Instead, you get the Director of Comms and Membership from the Evangelical Alliance.
Okay, so what does that mean then, working for the Evangelical Alliance? What is that all about?
So we are the largest and oldest unity movement for evangelicals in the UK and arguably from around the world. We draw together individuals, churches, charities, organisations, because we fundamentally believe that it is in unity, when we work together, that we can make Jesus known.
And you've been working on a new project recently called Being Human. So
Yes.
What has that got to do with being evangelical? What's that got to do with the church? Can you just explore what that means?
In 2 seconds. Yes, so what does it mean to be human? Is possibly the most basic, fundamental, but equally most contested question our culture is asking of itself today. Evangelicals, at our heart, we are people of the evangel. We're people of the good news. We genuinely, fervently believe that Jesus is good news to people, is good news to communities, is good news to society. And at the heart of it, to be human is to be made in the image of Christ. But that conversation is massively being debated at the moment, and often is changing so fast in our society that us in the church are kind of reeling as things change and shift so fundamentally. So what we're trying to do is start that conversation, is to say, is there something beautiful that the church has to offer into this conversation about what does it mean to be human? I think we'd agree that there is. So we're having that conversation. My colleague, Peter Linus, and I, we've just launched a podcast called Being Human. It's available on iTunes, on Spotify, where we're discussing what's going on in culture, what are the stories that we're talking about, how are those stories framing and forming our understanding of being human, what's the biblical narrative, what's the big story that we are a part of, and then how does that affect how we operate, who we are, who we understand ourselves to be, and how do we practice being followers of Jesus in this time and in this space. So
you cover things like artificial intelligence,
Yep.
and you cover Love Island,
Yep.
Facebook,
Yep.
A whole variety of things in this podcast.
I am an expert on all of these things.
So there you go. And I saw alongside the EA, you also work with something called Renovaré. Do you want to explain what Renovaré are and what they do as well?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of Renovaré UK, which was birthed out of the work of Dallas Willard and Richard Foster and some of the other guys, mainly in the US, but from all over the world, coming together because they recognized, in a similar way with some of the work that we're doing Being Human, that when we make the gospel really small, when we make the gospel simply about sin and redemption, and we miss the goodness of creation and the hope of restoration and regeneration and recreation, we miss something. That when Jesus calls us to him, he doesn't say, take your ticket, stick it in your pocket, and when you die, you're going to be with me. Instead, he invites us to life in its fullness. So what does it mean to practice? What does it mean to put in effort? Because as Dallas Willard would say, grace is opposed to earning, not to effort. So some of these principles, some of these ideas, some of these practices is what the Renovaré organisation looked like. And my delight in this is bringing some of these ideas, these rich veins of discipleship that have been flowing through the church throughout the ages and across the streams. What does it look like if we put that into our practice, if we put that into the architecture of our church in our daily lives? So that's what I'm doing with Renovaré at the moment.
And so for many, I guess, busy church leaders who have a full diary already, trying to make sure we look after ourselves first and our relationship with God is so important. What kind of suggestions might you give people who are perhaps almost stale, perhaps, in their relationship with God? What might they try in new ways, maybe perhaps connect with God in a fresh understanding?
Wow.
In a minute.
Easy question. Thanks, Andy. I just remember what I was like after I had kids. I was 30. I'd been a Christian for 11 years, and Jesus was not my first love. He was maybe entering my top 20. If I was doing well, I would remember I was a Christian maybe once a month. I was exhausted. And yet when I heard from people who are saying soul care and look after yourself and you can only give out what you put in. Go on retreat, get some sleep, rest well. Genuinely wanted to punch them in the face. I was exhausted. How do you rest well when you've got a baby screaming at you every 2 hours to be fed? And a friend of mine turned around to me and said, if the good news is good news, it has to work today. It can't wait until your kids are old enough. It can't wait until you've got time to go on retreat. It can't wait long enough until you've finished the book, gone on the course, attended the training. If it isn't good news to you today, it isn't good news. So at that point, I turned around and I said, Jesus, you promised me you would never leave me. And you promised me that you would always be my first love. So help me fall in love with you again. And I started doing silence for 5 minutes a day. After the kids had gone to bed, before I was allowed a glass of wine, I had to go and be quiet in front of Jesus. And I was allowed 5 minutes. And that started me on a journey that said, little by little, step by step, I'm going to orientate my body, my mind, my practice, and my relationships around the person of Jesus. Because if I want to be like him, I need to do the things that he did. And so little by little, step by step, those practices that he practiced, that he advocated for us, Matthew 5-7, if you want some ideas, go there. There are some really simple things, but it's not about waiting. It's about today.
Great. And finally, your seminar this afternoon is going to be on?
The joy of speaking into contested culture.
So there you go. That's there to look forward to as well. Round of applause for my wife.
Thanks.
I'm married up.